All right, welcome back to this week's episode of the Healthy Celiac Podcast. I've got an amazing guest on the show today to talk with us about his journey with celiac disease, and he's a fellow podcaster as well. So he's going to tell us all about his new ventures with his new website and things that have been going on for him. So I'd love you to welcome to the show Ben Hampton. Hey Ben, how you going?
Hey, good. And yourself, Belinda?
I am great. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much for allowing me to come on and for coming on my show as well. And we've been chatting ever since and been chatting for a long time. And I've been listening to your pod and just gained so much from it. And I'm sure it'd be cool chat, just like chatting about celiac, but also about podcasting and Yeah,
absolutely. So I thought it'd be really cool to share your story, Ben, because women are really good at going to the doctors when something's wrong with them and getting answers. And what I see is men, not to stereotype or anything, but what we see is men seem to ignore things a little bit more than what women do. And I guess don't go to the doctors quite as easily or as often as women. So I'd love you to share your story with everyone for, how you went about getting your diagnosis, what was happening in the lead up to your diagnosis, what happened? Tell us your story so that you can inspire other men not to ignore their symptoms.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that guys are really bad at, speaking up about their physical and mental health. And that's been something I've been really working on since my own diagnosis and sort of figuring out this whole, celiac diagnosis and going gluten-free and figuring out how to look after my physical and mental health. But yeah, things really kicked off, I would say, in 2020. The whole family caught a gastro bug. My eldest daughter at the time and my wife pretty much recovered in it was a bad one. It lingered around for a while with both of them and myself, but they recovered in a week or so, and they were sort of back to their normal selves. But it just attacked me so bad, and I recovered for a little while, and then I just go back and it'd be like I was having this gastro bug again. Like the same symptoms would come up and all the GI stuff. And the vomiting and diarrhea and brain fog was coming about at that point, and but it all these symptoms just kept lingering. So I kept on going back to the GP, and it was COVID. It was during COVID as well, so it was hard to get in with the GP. And when I'd sit down, I'd sort of feel really rushed, and but I was explaining all these symptoms I had. And this went on for months and months and months. And basically the answer was, look, I think your body's just recovering. We might send you for some tests eventually if this keeps on going, and just sort of, take some probiotics and see how you go. And so I went away and took that advice, and they did say don't change your diet whatsoever. And I said, okay, yep, no problems. I'll just keep on doing what I'm doing. At this stage, I was just, weight was dropping off me. I'm a pretty small guy anyway, but I was probably around 70 kilos, but I lost 10 kilos from the point of when the symptoms started to diagnosis. But and that was the most worrying thing, that the weight was just dropping off me, and I wasn't doing anything different. I was still exercising the same, going to the gym the same amount of time, not changing my diet whatsoever, just eating the same sort of stuff. But I just kept on having these lingering symptoms, really intensely bad stomach pain. Couldn't put it down to a certain food or anything at the time. And just brain fog, could not think clearly whatsoever. Kept on getting all this joint pain and locking up in my back and just pretty much everywhere. I'd be bending over at work and just literally lock up and not be able to get back up. And just huge mood swings, so up and down. I would go from feeling really, really down at one point to just feeling extremely anxious to feeling just lethargic. And it would just be this roller coaster. And my head was just all over the shop. So I just kept on going back to the GP. I probably had 3 or 4 visits, asking for several tests. And so they sent me off for initially an ultrasound. Then we had a CT, an MRI, and we had all the full, blood tests done, the full blood count that's on there these days, not counting celiac, unfortunately, that had everything tested, and even had a stool test done as well, several stool tests, and they all came back normal. Like everything was normal except for very slight markers on my liver. So everything was within normal range, but the liver markers were there. So the GP said basically that's to be expected. You've been through all these bouts of recurring gastro bugs. Just see how you're going. And I said in the last appointment, I just said, look, I think this is diet related. I've started keeping a food journal out of desperation, and I found
good on
that,
you.
I just had to at that point. I was like, what is going on? And I found that, breads and pastas and beer, and like all the gluten containing stuff that I know now was causing me symptoms. And my wife, Beck, actually said at the time, she was like, okay, maybe you have like a gluten intolerance. And I was like, what is hell is gluten? Is I don't know what that is. Like my knowledge was just like minimal. So I basically took that food journal back to the GP, and they said I would not change your diet whatsoever. I really don't think it's food related. Belinda, seriously, I got to the point where I was just like, I thought it was all in my head. And I remember sitting down with my wife. We were just looking at each other at dinner time, and like I was just like a gaunt, like frail shell. And I was just basically like, I don't know what's going on. And she was looking at me, and basically put our eldest daughter down that night, I think, and we just had a chat. And she's like, look, maybe you need to, go see someone and talk to someone about this. Like maybe this is, not a physical thing. Maybe this is something else that's, and I was basically convinced. I was like, yeah, okay.
Did she mean psychological?
Yeah.
Wow.
Maybe this is, you've had all the testing done. And I thought the same at that point. I was like, okay, maybe this is just all in my head. And I was just, I was convinced I had some sort of, terminal illness that no one knew about. I was like writing a diary entry for my daughter, because I thought I'm not going to be here. So I'm just going to like start like, journaling for her and show her that. It was pretty dire. And it just got to that point. And then very luckily, a friend of ours was diagnosed the year before in 2019. And she said, look, these symptoms are crazy. And my wife was chatting to her, she works with her, and she said, get Ben to go straight down to the GP, ask for celiac serology, straight away. And so I took that, I asked my GP, and my wife actually sat in the room, because I was like, I couldn't ask or like any questions. I couldn't
Sometimes
speak.
People need that, don't they? They need that person just to advocate for them when they can't think straight. Yeah,
100%. And my wife was more than happy to go down there and do it. And like, she basically explained, look, Ben needs to get this done. Cause I was at the point where my brain fog was so bad, I could hardly hold a conversation. Like it was so bad. And so we asked for that, and they said, look, we've tried everything else. Actually, there is some like signals there. It possibly could be, very unlikely. Went to get it like a day or two later, came back literally off the charts. They rang me. They're like, you have to come back in straight away. And so I booked an appointment, and they said, you're severely celiac.
Wow.
And then had did the gluten challenge, went forward for that. I thought it was bonkers that they said you had to, eat gluten for 6 weeks in the lead up to get a diagnosis. Like you have to eat the poison.
It's
knowingly. It is, but she's, they did say like that's the only way to like 100% know. That's the gold standard in Australia. So did that. And the gastroenterologist basically, before I got put under, said, look, I know 100% you have celiac. I'm just checking there's no like serious damage that you've done. But they found like a few ulcers and that sort of thing, but they were all fine, and have pretty much healed up since. So had the diagnosis 2 days before Chrissy in 2020. But
wow. Oh my God. Your story is so similar to mine in that they knew my blood was off the charts. I didn't thankfully have to do the biopsy. And my doctor said to me, I'm going to tell you your results in the new year. He was like, I'm not telling you before Christmas.
Wow.
Because it's too much to deal with. And I went back in the new year, and that's when he told me. But wow, 2 days before Christmas, that's a lot to deal with. How did you cope with that?
To be honest, like I think I was just completely relieved. Like in the lead up to that, like that entire year, I was just, I did think I was dying. Like I was like pretty much convinced, like that something was happening that they couldn't figure out. And like I was on the way out. So to get a diagnosis and to know that it was a diet, that was going to treat it. Like they did say, I remember ringing the gastroenterologist office, and the receptionist just said, "Look, have Chrissy just go all out." During Chrissy, I'm like, I am done with gluten.
Yeah.
Do not put gluten near me. Like, just
Yeah.
give me this test. I want to go
Yeah.
gluten free. And I just, like, I know people talk about like grieving gluten, but I just didn't have. I just wasn't in the space to do that. So I'm more like, I know that I do miss certain foods occasionally, but for the most part, I'm just like, I'm so thankful for the diagnosis, and to know that that it is just a diet that can keep us healthy. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Far out. That's crazy, isn't it? And like your story is so similar to so many people's, in that the doctors just don't know, do they? They just fob us off. I was the same as you. It took about a year to get a diagnosis. It was just one thing after another, told all these ridiculous things. And then finally a doctor that actually had a clue, just like your friend. Like, how amazing. Do you often sit there and go, if it wasn't for her, how long would have I carried on dealing with that? Like, if it wasn't for that one particular person saying, hey, you got to go get tested, far out. Like, to think what could have continued to happen.
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know where I would be. It freaks me out to think about where I would be, because I was just in a terrible space, like physically, mentally. I had no idea what was going on. So to like have an answer, and unfortunately, as you say, it is the story of so many. And like I always say, I try not to throw too much shade at GPs or like any health professionals whatsoever, because I know that so many of them have their hearts in the right place and they're doing the absolute best that they can. And like during COVID, it was just an insane time for them to, and that's the thing as well. It is just the lack of awareness in the celiac space as well, that, they have to be across like a ridiculous amount, like hundreds of different symptoms and diagnoses. And it's just, they're not a specialist in like any of those fields. And you do unfortunately have to go up to a specialist to get the correct answers. But it like, as well, it's not on regular blood screening, which is like, I'm a huge advocate for getting it on there. And chatting to a few people recently, hopefully in the near future, that's going to be happening with some research that they're doing. But like, it's just, it is ridiculous that it comes down to that. Like, you're at your wit's end, or you have all these symptoms that, they call it the clinical chameleon celiac. It flies under the radar so much, but unfortunately, it takes like the prompting of someone else who's had it, or a family or friend member, or like a health professional as well, who may know that road. Who personally has like an affiliation with, with celiac disease, or who has been through it themselves, or has, a family member has been through it. So I have no idea where I would be if it wasn't for her. So anytime we catch up now, it's great. Like, she's they just live just down the road. They have kids around our same age, and it's so cool, like catching up, and just, we can talk about, getting gluten and new gluten-free products coming out, and chat about all of that. And she's awesome, and they're great friends of ours. So and in more ways than one now.
That's so cool. So do you think that having the gastro was what triggered it for you? Did you have any form of those symptoms prior to that, or did it all kind of just spiral from that episode of being sick?
Yeah, I mean, that's when it really, really ramped up. But I can, like, speaking to my wife and looking back and everything in hindsight, like I speak to my guests about this all the time. They're like, no, actually, you know what? Like, I remember, symptoms in primary school or high school. And I was definitely one of those kids who had signs and signals of it. Like, I had the shadows under the eyes, the dark circles under the eyes since I was a little kid. Like since I was in primary school, would react to certain foods and have issues with my gut. Not be able to focus. Like, brain fog was horrible at school. And just didn't sit, like nothing really sunk in. And definitely had. And later on as well, like into my early 20s and mid 20s, I was having a lot of like gut issues, just flare ups in the gut. And I was just thinking, I must have just eaten something a bit bad, or always being put down to like, that like the curry or something that I ate, or like maybe something was off that I made.
Yep.
And to granted, like I was eating a whole heap of terrible food, and not really treating my body that well. And I think that that's like, unfortunately, that's how it was sort of treated when I would go maybe have a checkup. If I ever did have a checkup,
Yep.
was always reluctant to go forward to the doctors. But when I did, and I'd have some health issues going on, like, gut related or headaches, tons of headaches, like
There you go.
so
Yep.
many migraines, throughout like early to mid 20s, horrible ones with the aura, and then just, not like really light sensitive, and just having to basically go to bed for, the rest of the day when they come on. But,
Yep.
like whenever I go to the doctors to try and figure out what was happening, it would always kind of be fobbed off to like, well, what's your, lifestyle like at the moment? It's like, well, I'm in a band, I'm drinking quite a lot, and, and probably not eating the right sort of diet and that sort of thing. They're like, well, that's what it's coming down
That's the
to.
easy answer, isn't it?
Yeah. Which is probably part of it, to be honest, but at the same time, there may have been celiac in the background too. So
definitely sounds like you've had a lot of symptoms over the years, but maybe having the gastro just full blown just went, here you go, this is the last straw kind of thing, and it's just wow. Now, I remember a while back we were talking about your brother and trying to get him to get tested. So has he since been tested? I'm assuming he has done the right thing.
He has. So he went forward and did the gluten challenge, and he had I believe he had the genetic testing alongside the celiac serology, which came back negative. But he went forward for the gastroscopy, and I think he had a colonoscopy at the same time. So they did both ends, and everything came back clear. But they did find that he is now intolerant to disaccharides. I'm pretty sure. Disaccharides, and he has a lactose intolerance, and he's been pretty much diagnosed with IBS on top of that too. But non-celiac, gluten sensitive. But he's it's weird as well, because he's sort of helping us out with this new venture with the website, and so he's sort of part of a gluten-free family in more ways than one.
He has to be.
But it's good. We were chatting, we were just sitting down doing an episode not long ago, a few weeks back, and he basically said, like, if it wasn't for your journey, like there's no way I would be going forward for like the testing around this sort of stuff. So it's I'm just so glad for him as well that he's gone forward and done the correct thing. And but again, had some terrible advice from health professionals, and just been bounced around to quite sort of untrained dietitians and nutritionists, and different GPs and health professionals, getting some questionable advice around things, which is just shocking, but again, kind of doesn't surprise me. But at the moment, non-celiac gluten sensitive, but still pretty much reacts even like the same way that I do. Like he had he didn't know about oat milk, so he had a latte just not long ago, and thinks that just even from that he had terrible symptoms, like pretty much for 2 or 3 days before things started to resolve. So
amazing. Well, it's good that he's got some answers, and he's got you to advocate for him and support him, and working together. That's so cool. That's the ultimate dream, isn't it? Working with your family and having them to support you. So that's pretty cool.
No, it's nice that we can sort of connect in, like, we've sort of grown, we've bonded a lot more, like over the last probably like 10 years or so, and going through this sort of stuff as well, like our gut and physical and mental health journeys as well. It's sort of bonded us a little bit further, so it's cool for to be doing that together.
Definitely. And has anyone else in your family had a diagnosis or been tested?
No, but they definitely should. It's often like, and I speak to so many people about this, like it's an awkward thing to chat to, often like parents or grandparents or people from different generations. And, and look, I do totally understand it. But I just, like, I'm constantly saying to, friends and family, like, just, if you haven't been tested for celiac, just do it, and and just see,
it's worth ruling it out.
Exactly, just ruling it out as something that's going on, because they've had a lot of stuff that could be related to celiac. I've got a ton of family members who've had a bunch of health issues, but I do have one family member, so my cousin's daughter. So yeah, I don't know if that's like a second cousin or a cousin once removed or something. I always get confused. But yeah, she's the only one who's officially diagnosed in the family. But I think a few other family members do have it. We have type 1 diabetes, which runs in the family too, and some other, you know, related health conditions. So I wish that other family members were sort of more proactive about it. And especially I try to give them, you know, some episodes to listen to related to their conditions, but sometimes it can just be, you know, sort of in one ear and out the other. But you know, at the same time, that's why we chat about this, right? Like to try and get that information out there.
Normalize it. And you know, you can only do what you can do. It's up to that individual to go and get tested. And you might have heard my story with my brother. He ignored his symptoms for years and years and years. And then he finally couldn't handle it any longer because he had like skin conditions all over his body. And he was just so like irritated and itchy. And he kept coming to me for help. I'm like, you're just getting given a Band-Aid from the doctors. They're just giving you cream. You need to go get a celiac disease diagnosis. And he's like a different person since he got his diagnosis. Like it's crazy to think how many years he put up with feeling like rubbish. And now like he's so healthy, he's so positive, and it's just, it's been the best outcome for him to get a diagnosis. So
that's awesome. And and as you said, like getting to that root cause of the issue as well, because like my brother's in the same situation. Like I opened up his cabinet the other day and I was like, what the hell is going on here? He's like, I know I look like a pharmacy, don't I? But that's how many like pills and you know, treatments and various like, you know, supplements and stuff that he was given when, you know, it was, he needed to do some further testing and some other further diagnoses. But it's crazy.
And diet is just the answer for so many people, for so many problems. It's crazy. Yeah, amazing. So I love that what you do is getting experts on your show and advocating for celiac disease and really spreading the message and getting it out there. What do you think kind of sparked that in you? What inspired you to start a podcast and share with the world more about celiac disease? Was it because of your diagnosis and how much you struggled, or what kind of sparked that idea to get it out there?
Yeah, it was pretty much just a combination of like everything that happened. So like since the diagnosis, since I got the positive blood test, my wife and I sat down and we're like, okay, what is this thing? Let's figure it out. And we sat down and watched YouTube videos and kind of went down this deep rabbit hole. And we were sort of looking at each other like, why isn't this out there? Like there must be other people going through this. So she said, why don't you start up an Instagram page? I'm sure there's other people going through this. I'm like, I don't like Instagram. I don't want to get into that. I was like, maybe like a Facebook page or something, and I can just do something locally and chat to people. But she was like, no, just do it. And so like I started researching during COVID. So it was kind of had the time to be able to do this sort of stuff. So sat down and, you know, figured out how to do an Instagram page and then I was just blown away by like how many people I started to connect with and chat to people like in the US, UK, Europe, and they were sharing these stories. And I was like, oh my God, this is nearly identical to what I've gone through as well. And they all have these really similar stories, a bit different because they're in different parts of the world and different regulations and ways of dealing with health professionals. But I was just thinking like, wow, this is like, some of these stories are like crazy. These stories are intense and crazy. And I just couldn't believe that there isn't enough awareness about it, given that it is related to so many, like, you know, between 250 and 300 symptoms and so many different health conditions relate to it. And there isn't, you know, and it's a diet. It's not a pill, or it's not like, you know, another medication or anything that treats it. It's a freaking diet. Like it's, it just blew my mind. And I was like, I've got to start like chatting about this and like sharing these stories from, you know, the people I'm chatting to. And I'm just one of those sort of people as well that once I pick up something, I'm just like, I could become a bit obsessed and totally like addicted. And I'm going through actual diagnosis for that currently. And so I'm having a follow-up appointment with a psychologist. So probably a lot of the way my brain works will make sense very soon for myself. But yeah, I think I've just got that sort of personality, and I just, I had no idea how to, start up an Instagram page, like just threw myself into that, figured out as I went. No idea with the podcast. You have been such a help with that. When I was like, I want to start one up, and you're like, maybe do this sort of stuff and sign up to, these guys. And that has been like so helpful as well. And
cool.
I think just finding people in this community where it's like, do you know what? We're all on the same mission. Let's just help each other, get to that goal of, just constantly spreading awareness about this thing. And
it helps you feel less alone, doesn't it?
100%.
It makes you feel like you're not the, the odd one out in the group. You're part of something much bigger than just yourself. It's pretty cool.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And like, just like speaking to like health professionals and stuff, I always feel so out of my depth. Like I never thought I would be a guy like speaking up about, physical and mental health. And like, I come from like a band background where, I thought I was going to be like a drummer in like in a band. Like that was my goal initially. And so to be like talking about, dietary requirements and gut health and mental health, it's never something that I thought I would do, but I'm loving it so much, just seeing, how much it's related to and how many different rabbit holes that you go down. And it's just, it's blown my mind, and figuring out, the gut brain axis and the microbiome and all of these people asking these huge questions around this disease and what it's related to and where we're trying to take it in the future. That just, like urges me on to, and just continuing to hear like the stories of so many like yourself and me and so many others in this community. It's like, no, this isn't good enough. Like we can't just like sit back and let, like everybody basically not talk about this. And just breaking down those stigmas of like, we got to talk about this stuff, whether it's, women or men. We're all kind of affected by it, because it's not only ourselves going through it. Like I found that in my own journey, and the guests that I have on the pod, it affects everybody. It affects, their friends and family. They worry about the person.
It really does.
And it just changes that whole dynamic. So I think, the more we can talk about it, the better off we'll be in the future. Yeah,
totally agree. I went out for a meal the other night at our local pub with about 20 mums from our kids' school.
Awesome.
And they used to have gluten-free on the menu, and they changed it to gluten reduced. And I was just like, what is this nonsense? And nearly every person at that table, I'm not overly close with all of them, but I'm close with a handful of them. Nearly everyone on that table checked in with me, and they're like, are you going to be able to get something to eat, Belinda? Like, you got to get gluten-free. Like, they all were really thoughtful and checking in. Like, that's so cool that, with a big group of women, that they took the time to check in on me and make sure that I was going to be able to get something safe to eat. If that had been 10 years ago, it probably wouldn't have even been on their radar, probably wouldn't have even been something that had been thought about. So it was actually really nice to have that awareness and more people, showing up for me as well. And you would know that as well. Like, the more you talk about it, the easier it is for other people to look after us and respect us. And, when I work with people and, they say, oh, my family did this or my loved one did that, it's like, you've really got to advocate for yourself, don't you? The more you talk about it, the more you speak up, the more others are going to look after you. And that is the biggest thing that I see in our community, is the ones that are suffering are the ones that aren't talking about it enough. So I think what you and I do is really helping so many people to be that voice and to get the word out there. So that is huge as well, isn't it?
Definitely. And it's so cool that like everybody, there was like checking in on you. And that's it kind of affirms that like everything you're doing, as awkward and as like, sometimes just like it feels yuck sometimes to have to do that, especially when you're newly diagnosed. But similarly, just like I've gotten to that point now where I'm like, you know what, like this is my health. If I have this little awkward conversation with a wait staff or with a manager or something, I've kind of brushed that aside now, because it's like, you know what, that having that little conversation that may take a couple of minutes and I'm probably going to walk out if I'm not happy with the answers. That's better than being like bedridden for like, the next couple of days, or like just having those symptoms. And the same goes with, yeah, really any decision in my own physical and mental health, like going for the checkups,
Yeah.
you know, getting a gym session in, like doing some breath work, doing an ice bath, like whatever it takes to just sort of, you know, have your own physical and mental health in check. And then you're able to bring your full self, you know, and yeah, to other people around you, to your friends and family. But yeah, found that yeah, it's very difficult. And I found that even just going out with my mates as well, my closest male mates, like it initially is just so awkward to sort of, you know, speak up and say, can I have the gluten-free, you know, menu? And I did feel really awkward about that at first. And, you know, like some of the friends were like, you know, just making comments and like having a dig and like, you know, it's something that guys do as well. And like, it's fine to a point until, you know, it's not until it starts to take its toll. But, you know, but now they're the ones who are like speaking up for me, and they'll like, you know, be asking like straight away, like, oh, did you ask if it was, you know, if they like clean the pans? And so they'll be asking follow-ups, and they're asking, you know, how like my celiac disease is going at the moment, and if I've had any flare-ups and how that is because I think it's that age as well. We're now in our like mid-30s, and we're kind of, you know, talking about all these things and chatting about, you know, our wives being, you know, pregnant or having given birth, and sort of chatting about having kids. And we're sort of openly much more talking about physical and mental health now, which is it's so much better than when I was like a teenager and in my 20s. It was, and that culture still exists, that like toxic masculinity of like not really speaking up about your health. But I've seen too many friends and family get into just a horrible situation with, you know, not talking. So I figure, you know, the more we can talk about stuff, the better. And as you say, like I always talk about this as well, like on the pod and with various guests, like talking about this stuff now, it might seem awkward, and it might put us in a little bit of like it just sucks talking about this all the time. And you and I like literally talk about it like all the time. But like, that's not only going to help us, it's going to help, you know, the current celiac and gluten-free generation, but it's also going to help our kids and, you know, the following generations coming up. And hopefully by us talking the hell out of this thing and just spreading as much awareness about it as possible, hopefully it won't even be a thing for them. And maybe there'll be a cure or, you know, like a vaccine or something for it in the future. And they won't need to, you know, talk up as much as we do now. So yeah.
It's funny because, like, you know, things like peanut allergies. Everyone knows what a peanut allergy is. I don't think you would come across anyone that's like, oh, what's a peanut allergy? What happens to you if you have a peanut allergy? Everyone knows what that is. And one day, maybe everyone will be like, oh, yeah, I know what celiac disease is. And they understand what it is. And I mean, I've been living with celiac disease for over 15 years. And in that period of time, the amount of awareness has grown dramatically, like ridiculous how much different it is now compared to back then. So I can only imagine, you know, where we will be in another 15 years. So it is pretty powerful, just, you know, getting the word out there and speaking about it. And that's the biggest thing, I think, more awareness.
100%. Yeah. And you would have seen so many changes. And I feel like I'm always just like on the cusp of this. Like I've only, you know, just got diagnosed in 2020, and there's like, people who have been like living with it, like yourself for like a decade or like several decades. And like, they've seen so many changes in like awareness, or like, you know, going through the fad culture, that fad period. And it's just bonkers to think like how far it's come. But just as soon as I was diagnosed, I was like, why is this not on regular bloods? I literally do not get it. That's like a light bulb moment for me. I literally don't understand why. And sitting down and chatting to Jason Tydin just recently, it looks like maybe that will, you know, it will be a possibility to have, you know, population screening happening sooner than later with his new process to diagnosis with the IL-2, which would be freaking amazing. That would just change the game. Yeah,
definitely. And so many people wouldn't suffer for so long, you know, if they get diagnosis younger or earlier rather than suffering for I mean, you would talk to people that would suffer for decades before they get a diagnosis. Like, that just blows my mind that, you know, people are suffering for that long and not getting answers. But yeah, if they were screened whenever they went to the doctors and got bloods taken, that would be amazing.
Yeah, to have that answer up front instead of going through, often like tens of thousands of dollars, right? Like the time and energy that it takes and time off work. Like I feel lucky in myself. I had to take a couple of weeks off work, like close to Christmas, but at the same time, like I feel like I had a pretty quick diagnosis from when my symptoms started. Just because I like was probably just became obsessed with figuring out what the answer was. But at the same time, like it's just not fair that people go on for years and years and years without an answer. And then it comes to like some dire situation that they actually get one.
Yeah, exactly. Totally agree. So I would love you to tell us now about your website and your podcast. And for those that are watching the episode on YouTube, you can see in the corner there, Ben's got, I'm pretty sure it's one of your new t-shirts hanging up there.
Yeah, the one chat at a time. Yeah, it's a bit of a slogan I've got. Just raising celiac disease awareness, not looking at it as like a huge mammoth effort, but just like literally just having, one chat at a time with a wait staff or with a family member or a friend or a health professional.
Powerful. So tell us about your website, where people can find you, and a bit more about your podcast as well.
Yeah, for sure. So we just literally just started up a website a couple of weeks back. It's glutenfreefamily.com.au. So that's got everything that we do with our Instagram page, with the events we're holding as well. We've done 3 of them this year, and hopefully we'll do some more in the future as well next year. And got the podcast feed as well. I've got a gluten-free podcast. And it's just weekly show, much like this, into, a mix of doing solo eps and guest episodes. And what else is on there? The shop. We've just got 2 t-shirt designs on there at the moment, but hopefully we'll get some more stuff up there in the future. And then we've just got discounts. We're just trying to showcase like all the brands that we've worked with, and that's, we can just share some discount codes because it's freaking, it's tough. The gluten-free tax on stuff at the moment. So if we can help out the community in any way in that regards, that's what we want to do. So
fantastic. So go check that out if you haven't already. And I will also pop any links below as well in the show notes. Anything you wanted to add before we sign off for the day, Ben?
I think just what we've hit on here today, I think we've chatted about a heap of stuff, but I think just like what you said before as well, that like you're not alone if you're going through this diagnosis process of getting a celiac diagnosis. Chat to so many people, and I know you do as well yourself. Just reach out to people, like use the resources that are there, because there's so many resources, like you said, now these days, like online. There's podcasts. There's Instagram pages, there's Facebook groups. Like you're not alone going through this. And I think like finding a supportive community is like half the battle, because I found, being in very niche communities in the past, like metal bands and like, prog rock groups and stuff, like you can feel like, a bit of an outsider when you walk into other, bigger groups, but knowing that you're understood and people are going through what you're going through, it's so freaking powerful. So I think just, like stick it out. And if you're going through that process at the moment, or if you're newly diagnosed, like don't stop just learning and just taking stuff on board, but you'll make mistakes. I've made a ton of mistakes. And you just, continually learn and just connect with people who understand you and who are like supportive around you and don't dismiss what you're going through. So
powerful message. Perfect. That is amazing to sign off on. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Ben. It's been awesome talking with you, and thanks everyone for listening, and I look forward to talking with you again on next week's show. Take care. Bye.
Thanks heaps for having me, Belinda. Cheers.
If you enjoyed this episode, head to belindawhelan.com to get yourself a free copy of my exclusive ebook, 11 Mistakes People Make Going Gluten-Free Living with Celiac Disease.